The Chola dynasty was one of the longest ruling dynasties in the history of southern India. The earliest datable references to this Tamil dynasty are in inscriptions from the 3rd century BCE left by Asoka of the Maurya Empire. As one of the 3 crowned kings, the dynasty continued to govern over varying territory until the 13th century CE. The heartland of the Koehlers was the fertile valley of the Kaveri River, but they ruled a significantly larger area at the height of the power from the later half of the 9th century till the beginning of the 13th century. The whole country south of the Tungabhadra was united and held as one state for a period of 2 centuries and more. Under Rajaraja Chola I and his successors Rajendra Chola I, Rajaraja Chola, Rajendra Chola and Koehlers Chola I, the dynasty became a military, economic and cultural power in South Asia and Southeast Asia. The power of the new empire was proclaimed to the Eastern world by the expedition to the Ganges which Rajendra Chola I undertook, and by the naval raids on cities of the maritime empire of Srivijaya, as well as by the repeated embassies to China. The Chola fleet represented the zenith of ancient Indian sea power. During the period 1010 to 1200, the Chola territories stretched from the islands of the Maldives in the south to as far north as the banks of the Kaveri River in Andhra Pradesh. Rajaraja Chola conquered peninsular South India, annexed parts of which is now Sri Lanka, and occupied the islands of the Maldives. Rajendra Chola sent a victorious expedition to North India that touched the river Ganges and defeated the Pala ruler of Pataliputra, Mahipala. He also successfully invaded cities of Srivijaya of Malaysia and Indonesia. The Chola dynasty went into decline at the beginning of the 13th century with the rise of the Pandyan dynasty, which ultimately caused their downfall. The Koehlers left a lasting legacy. The patronage of Tamil literature and the zeal in the building of temples has resulted in some great works of Tamil literature and architecture. The Chola kings were avid builders and envisioned the temples in their kingdoms not only as places of worship but also as centers of economic activity. They pioneered a centralized form of government and established a disciplined bureaucracy. The Chola school of art spread to Southeast Asia and influenced the architecture and art of Southeast Asia. Origins. The Koehlers are also known as the Chola. There is very little information available regarding their origin. Its antiquity is evident from the mentions in ancient Pali Tamil literature and in inscriptions. Later medieval Koehlers also claimed a long and ancient lineage. Mentions in the early Sangam literature indicate that the earliest kings of the dynasty antedated 100 CE. Paramelalagar, the annotator of the Tamil classic Tirukural, mentions that this could be the name of an ancient king. A commonly held view is that Chola is, like Chera and Pandya, the name of the ruling family, a clan of immemorial antiquity. The annotator Paramelalagar said, "The charity of people with ancient lineage are forever generous in spite of the reduced means." Other names in common use for the Koehlers are Kili, Valavan and Sembian. Kili perhaps comes from the Tamil kil meaning digger, cleave, and conveys the idea of a digger or a worker of the land. This word often forms an integral part of early Chola names like Nadunkali, Nalankali, and so on, but almost drops out of use in later times. The Valavan is most probably connected with Valam, fertility, and means owner, a ruler of a fertile country. Sembian is generally taken to mean a descendant of Shibi, a legendary hero whose self-sacrifice in saving a dove from the pursuit of a falcon figures among the early Chola legends and forms the subject matter of the Sibi Jataka among the Jataka stories of Buddhism. In Tamil lexicon, Chola means Soaji or Sai, denoting a newly formed kingdom. In the lines of Pandya, the old country, there is very little written evidence available of the Koehlers prior to the 7th century. Historic records exist thereafter, including inscriptions on temples. During the past 150 years. Historians have gleaned significant knowledge on the subject from a variety of sources such as ancient Tamil Sangam literature, oral traditions, religious texts, temple and copper plate inscriptions. The main source for the available information of the early Cholas is the early Tamil literature of the Sangam period. There are also brief notices on the Chola country and its towns, ports and commerce furnished by the periplus of the Erythraean Sea, and in the slightly later work of the geographer Ptolemy. Mathavamsa, a Buddhist text written down during the 5th century CE, recounts a number of conflicts between the inhabitants of Ceylon and Koehlers in the 1st century BCE. Koehlers are mentioned in the Pillars of Asoka inscriptions, where they are mentioned among the kingdoms which, though not subject to Asoka, were on friendly terms with him. The Koehlers were very kind-hearted kings. History. The history of the Koehlers falls into 4 periods. The early Koehlers of the Sangam literature. The interregnum between the fall of the Sangam Koehlers and the rise of the imperial medieval Koehlers under Vijayalaya, the dynasty of Vijayalaya. And finally the later Chola dynasty of Kulodhunga Chola I from the 3rd quarter of the 11th century. Early Koehlers. The earliest Chola kings for whom there is tangible evidence are mentioned in the Sangam literature. Scholars generally agree that this literature belongs to the 2nd to 1st few centuries of the Common Era. The internal chronology of this literature is still far from settled, and at present a connected account of the history of the period cannot be derived. It records the names of the kings and the princes, and of the poets who extolled them. The Sangam literature also records legends about mythical Chola kings. These myths speak of the Chola king Kantaman, who is a supposed contemporary of the sage Agastya, whose devotion brought the river Kaveri into existence. 2 names are prominent among those Chola kings known to have existed who feature in Sangam literature: Karikala Chola and Kasenganan. There are no sure means of settling the order of succession, of fixing the relations with one another and with many other princelings of around the same period. Ura was their oldest capital. Kaveri Pattinam also served as an early Chola capital. The Mathavamsa mentions that an ethnic Tamil adventurer, a Chola prince known as Elara, invaded the island Sri Lanka around 235 BCE. Interregnum. There is not much information about the transition period of around 3 centuries from the end of the Sangam age to that in which the Pandyas and Pallavas dominated the Tamil country. An obscure dynasty, the Kalabras, invaded Tamil country, displaced the existing kingdoms and ruled during that time. They were displaced by the Pallava dynasty and the Pandyan dynasty in the 6th century. Little is known of the fate of the Koehlers during the succeeding 3 centuries until the accession of Vijayalaya in the 2nd quarter of the 9th century. As per inscriptions found in and around Thanjavur shows that the kingdom was ruled by Maurya's for 3 centuries, which was ended by Vijayalaya Chola by capturing Thanjavur from Elanga Maurya somewhere between 848 to 851. Epigraphy and literature provide few glimpses of the transformations that came over this line of kings during this long interval. What is certain is that when the power of the Koehlers fell to its lowest ebb and that of the Pandyas and Pallavas rose to the north and south of them, this dynasty was compelled to seek refuge and patronage under the more successful rivals. The Koehlers continued to rule over a diminished territory in the neighborhood of Uriah, but only in a minor capacity. In spite of the reduced powers, the Pandyas and Pallavas accepted Chola princesses in marriage, possibly out of regard for the reputation. Numerous Pallava inscriptions of this period mention the having fought rulers of the Chola country. Despite this loss in influence and power, it is unlikely that the Koehlers lost total grip of the territory around Uriah, their old capital, as Vijayalaya, when he rose to prominence, hailed from that area. Around the 7th century, a Chola kingdom flourished in present-day Andhra Pradesh. These Telugu Koehlers traced their descent to the early Sangam Cholas. However, it is not known if they had any relation to the early Koehlers. It is possible that a branch of the Tamil Cholas migrated north during the time of the Pallavas to establish a kingdom of their own, away from the dominating influences of the Pandyas and Pallavas. The Chinese pilgrim Xuanzang, who spent several months in Kashipuram during 639–640, writes about the kingdom of Kuliyar, in an apparent reference to these Telugu Koehlers. Imperial Chola Empire. Vijayalaya was the founder of the Imperial Chola dynasty, which was the beginning of one of the most splendid empires in Indian history. Vijayalaya, possibly a feudatory of the Pallava dynasty, took an opportunity arising out of a conflict between the Pandya dynasty and Pallava dynasty in c. 850, captured Thanjavur from Maturaya, and established the imperial line of the medieval Chola dynasty. Thanjavur became the capital of the Imperial Chola dynasty. The Chola dynasty was at the peak of its influence and power during the medieval period. Through the leadership and vision, Chola kings expanded the territory and influence. The second Chola king, Aditya I, caused the demise of the Pallava dynasty and defeated the Pandyan dynasty of Madurai in 885, occupied large parts of the Kannada country, and had marital ties with the western Ganga dynasty. In 925, his son Parantaka I conquered Sri Lanka. Rajaraja Chola I and Rajendra Chola I were the greatest rulers of the Chola dynasty, extending it beyond the traditional limits of a Tamil kingdom. At its peak, the Chola Empire stretched from the island of Sri Lanka in the south to the Godavari-Krishna River basin in the north, up to the Kingan coast in Bhatkal, the entire Malabar coast in addition to Lakshadweep, Maldives, and vast areas of Chera country. The kingdoms of Deccan and the eastern coast were subordinates, feudatories of the Koehlers, and other kingdoms like the Chalukyas paid tribute to the Koehlers 1000 to 1075. Rajaraja Chola I was a ruler with inexhaustible energy, and he applied himself to the task of governance with the same zeal that he had shown in waging wars. He integrated his empire into a tight administrative grid under royal control, and at the same time strengthened local self-government. Therefore, he conducted a land survey in 1000 CE to effectively marshal the resources of his empire. He also built the Brihadaswara temple in 1010 CE. Rajendra Chola I conquered Odisha, and his armies continued to march further north and defeated the forces of the Pala dynasty of Bengal and reached the Ganges River in North India. Rajendra Chola I built a new capital called Gangaikonda Kolapuram to celebrate his victories in northern India. Rajendra Chola I successfully invaded Srivijaya, which led to the decline of the empire there. This expedition had such a great impression to the Malay people of the medieval period that his name was mentioned in the corrupted form as Raja Chola in the medieval Malay chronicle Safhara Melayu. He also completed the conquest of the island of Sri Lanka and took the Sinhala king Mahinda V as a prisoner. In addition to his conquests of Ratapadi in Kannada country, Rajendra's territories included the area falling on the Ganges-Hooghly Damodar basin, as well as Sri Lanka and Maldives. The kingdoms along the east coast of India up to the river Ganges acknowledged Chola suzerainty. 3 diplomatic missions were sent to China in 1016, 1033, and 1077. The Western Chalukya Empire under Satyeshwara and Samshwara I tried to wriggle out of Chola domination from time to time. primarily due to the Chola influence in the Vengi kingdom. The Western Chalukyas mounted several unsuccessful attempts to engage the Chola emperors in war, and except for a brief occupation of Vengi territories between 1118 to 1126, all their other attempts ended in failure, with successive Chola emperors routing the armies of the Chalukyas at various places in many wars. Rajendra Chola defeated Someshwara II of the Western Chalukya Empire and made an alliance with Prince Vikramaditya VI. Koehlers always successfully controlled the Chalukyas in the western Deccan by defeating them in war and levying tribute on them. Even under the emperors of the Koehlers like Kulodhunga and Vikrama Chola, the wars against the Chalukyas were mainly fought in Chalukya territories in Karnataka or in the Telugu country like Vengi, Kakinada, and Antipur, or Gati. Then the Kannadic kingdoms of the Kadambas, Hoysalas, Vidama, or Kalashuris steadily increased the power and finally replaced the Chalukyas. With the occupation of Dawa in north-central Karnataka by the Hoysalas under Vishnuvardhana, where he based himself with his son Narasimha I in charge at the Hoysala capital Dwarasamudra around 1149, and with the Kalashuris occupying the Chalukyan capital for over 35 years from around 1150 to 1151, the Chalukya kingdom was already starting to dissolve. The Koehlers under Kulodhunga Chola III even collaborated to herald the dissolution of the Chalukyas by aiding Hoysalas under Veerabalala II, the son-in-law of the Chola monarch, and defeated the western Chalukyas in a series of wars with Someshwara IV between 1185 to 1190. The last Chalukya king's territories did not even include the erstwhile Chalukyan capitals Badami, Manyakettu, Kalyani. That was the final dissolution of Chalukyan power, though the Chalukyas existed only in name since 1135 to 1140. But the Koehlers remained stable until 1215, were absorbed by the Pandyan Empire and ceased to exist by 1279. On the other hand, throughout the period from 1150 to 1280, the staunchest opponents of the Koehlers were Pandya princes who tried to win independence for the traditional territories. This period saw constant warfare between the Koehlers and the Pandyas. The Koehlers also fought regular wars with the eastern Gangas of Kalinga-protected Vengi, though it remained largely independent under Chola control, and had domination of the entire eastern coast with the feudatories the Telugu Koehlers, Velananti Koehlers, Renandu Koehlers etc., who also always aided the Koehlers in the successful campaigns against the Chalukyas and levying tribute on the Kannadic kingdoms, and fought constantly with the Sinhalas, who attempted to overthrow the Chola occupation of Lanka. But until the time of the later Chola king Kulothunga I, the Koehlers had firm control over Lanka. A later Chola king, Rajaraja Chola II, was strong enough to prevail over a confederation of 5 Pandya princes who were aided by the traditional friend, the king of Lanka. This once again gave control of Lanka to the Koehlers, despite the fact that they were not strong under the resolute Rajaraja Chola II. However, his successor, the last great Chola monarch Kulothunga Chola III, reinforced the hold of the Koehlers by quelling rebellion and disturbances in Lanka and Madurai, defeated Hoysala generals under Veerabalala II in Karufia, in addition to holding on to his traditional territories in Tamil country, eastern Gangavadi, Draksharama, Vengi and Kalinga. After this, he entered into a marital alliance with Veerabalala II, and his relationship with Hoysala seems to have become friendlier. Overseas conquests during the reign of Rajaraja Chola I and his successors Rajendra Chola I, Rajendra Chola and Kulodhunga Chola I. The Chola armies invaded Sri Lanka, the Maldives and some parts of Southeast Asia like Malaysia, Indonesia and southern Thailand of the Srivijaya Empire in the 11th century. Rajaraja Chola I launched several naval campaigns that resulted in the capture of Sri Lanka, Maldives and the Malabar coast. In 1025, Rajendra Chola launched naval raids on ports of Srivijaya and against the Burmese kingdom of Pegu, and conquered parts of Srivijaya in Malaysia and Indonesia and the Tambralinga kingdom in southern Thailand and occupied it for some time. A second invasion was led by Rajendra Chola, who conquered Kedar in Malaysia of Srivijaya in the late 11th century. Later Koehlers' marital and political alliances between the eastern Chalukyas began during the reign of Rajaraja following his invasion of Vengi. Rajaraja Chola's daughter married Chalukya Prince Vimaladitya, and Rajendra Chola's daughter Maurya Devi was married to the eastern Chalukya prince, Rajaraja Narendra. Rajendra Chola's son, Rajendra Chola, was assassinated in a civil disturbance in 1070, and Kulothunga Chola I, the son of Maurya Devi and Rajaraja Narendra, ascended the Chola throne. Thus began the later Chola dynasty. The later Chola dynasty was led by capable rulers such as Kulothunga Chola I, his son Vikrama Chola, other successors like Rajaraja Chola II, Rajaraja Chola II, and Kulothunga Chola III, who conquered Kalinga, Ilam, and Kartara. However, the rule of the later Cholas between 1218, starting with Rajaraja Chola II, to the last emperor Rajendra Chola III, was not as strong as those of the emperors between 850–1215. Around 1118, they lost control of Vengi to the western Chalukya and Gangavadi to the Hoysala Empire. However, these were only temporary setbacks, because immediately following the accession of King Vikrama Chola, the son and successor of Kulothunga Chola I, the Koehlers lost no time in recovering the province of Vengi by defeating Chalukya Someshwara III and also recovering Gangavadi from the Hoysalas. The Chola Empire, though not as strong as between 850–1150, was still largely territorially intact under Rajaraja Chola II, a fact attested by the construction and completion of the third Chola architectural marvel, the chariot-shaped Theravada temple at Dharasuram on the outskirts of modern Kumbakonam. Chola administration and territorial integrity until the rule of Kulothunga Chola III was stable and very prosperous up to 1215, but during his rule itself the decline of the Chola power started following his defeat by Maravarman Sundarapandian II in 1215–16. Subsequently, the Koehlers also lost control of the island of Lanka and were driven out by the revival of Sinhala power, in continuation of the decline, also marked by the resurgence of the Pandyan dynasty as the most powerful rulers in South India. A lack of a controlling central administration in its erstwhile Pandyan territories prompted a number of claimants to the Pandya throne to cause a civil war in which the Sinhalas and the Koehlers were involved by proxy. Details of the Pandyan civil war and the role played by the Koehlers and Sinhalas are present in the map of Amsa as well as the Pallava and Petai inscriptions. In the 12th century, the Maharaja of Chola sent Trilume, also known as Raja Muda Lumaya, to the central islands of present-day Philippines to establish a base for expeditionary forces. He was a minor prince of the Chola dynasty which occupied Sumatra at the time. He later rebelled and established his own independent state, which would become the Rajanate of Cebu. The Koehlers, under Rajaraja Chola III and later his successor Rajendra Chola III, were quite weak and therefore experienced continuous trouble. One feudatory, the Kadava chieftain Koparunchinga I, even held Rajaraja Chola III as hostage for some time. At the close of the 12th century, the growing influence of the Hoysalas replaced the declining Chalukyas as the main player in the Kannada country, but they too faced constant trouble from the Senas and the Kalashuris, who were occupying Chalukya capital because those empires were their new rivals. So naturally, the Hoysalas found it convenient to have friendly relations with the Koehlers from the time of Rajaraja Chola III, who had defeated Hoysala Virabala II, who had subsequent marital relations with the Chola monarch. This continued during the time of Rajaraja Chola III, the son and successor of Rajendra Chola III. The Pandyas in the south had risen to the rank of a great power who ultimately banished the Hoysalas from Malenadu, Kannada country, who were allies of the Koehlers from Tamil country, and the demise of the Koehlers themselves ultimately was caused by the Pandyas in 1279. The Pandyas first steadily gained control of the Tamil country as well as territories in Sri Lanka, Chera country, Telugu country under Maravarman Sundara Pandyan II and his able successor Jatavarman Sundara Pandyan before inflicting several defeats on the joint forces of the Koehlers under Rajaraja Chola III, his successor Rajendra Chola III, and the Hoysalas under Someshwara. His son Ramana the Rajendra III tried to survive by aligning with the Kadava Pallavas and the Hoysalas in turn in order to counter the constantly rising power of the Pandyans, who were the major players in the Tamil country from 1215 and had intelligently consolidated the position in Madurai, Ramaswaram, Milam, Cheranadu and Kanyakumari, and had been steadily increasing the territories in the Kaveri belt between Dindigul, Tiruchi, Satyamangalam, as well as in the Kaveri delta, i.e. Thanjavur, Mayuram, Chidambaram, Vridashalam, Kashi, finally marching all the way up to Arcot, Tirumalai, Nellore, Vasaiwadi, Vengi, Kalingam belt by 1250. The Pandyas steadily routed both the Hoysalas and the Koehlers. They also dispossessed the Hoysalas, who had been overestimating the power by interfering in the politics of Tamil country by routing them under Jatavarman Sundara Pandyan at Kannanukupam and chased them back to the Mysore plateau and stopped the war only thereafter. At the close of Rajendra's reign, the Pandyan Empire was at the height of prosperity and had taken the place of the Chola Empire in the eyes of the foreign observers. The last recorded date of Rajendra III is 1279. There is no evidence that Rajendra was followed immediately by another Chola prince. The Hoysalas were routed from Kannanukupam around 1279 by Kulasekara Pandyan, and in the same war the last Chola emperor Rajendra III was routed, and the Chola Empire ceased to exist thereafter. Thus the Chola Empire was completely overshadowed by the Pandyan Empire and sank into obscurity and ceased to exist by the end of the 13th century.